Hey, good afternoon to you. 406 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, 4:30 from Detroit, Michigan, Lorenzo Sewell will be with us, the senior pastor at the 180 Church, and he was just with President Trump this past weekend. We'll talk to him about that visit and about the black vote in America. Lorenzo Sewell has a lot to say on that subject. Adam Credo will be here from the Washington Free Beacon at 5 o'clock as that gigantic publicity stunt that Joe Biden tried to build in the Mediterranean, well, it floated away. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The Virginia primary concluding yesterday, last evening, and a big win for a Republican Senate candidate. You may know him. I'm going to let Donald Trump introduce him here.
Senate candidate who's going to win from Virginia, Hung Cao.
Hung Cao. And Hung Cao joins us on the phone right now. Captain Cao, great to have you with us. A big victory in Virginia yesterday, 61.6% of the vote. And it's official. You're the nominee. What do you think?
Oh, thank you so much, Vince. I was talking to Corey earlier, your producer, and I was like, we were just starting a game of pool, and my team came over like, hey, you just won. Like it was only 14 minutes into it, but is a good victory for us. It just really solidifies the fact that, Virginia wants me to represent them in the U.S. Senate. Yeah,
well, that's the message that was sent yesterday for sure. I just played that audio of President Trump. He endorsed your candidacy. How big of a role did he play in bringing you to this point?
I mean, it is amazing to have the former president endorse me, especially on Memorial Day weekend. I was a combat veteran, and I've seen a lot of, my friends pay the ultimate sacrifice, and I've also seen what this country can do, too. I mean, I came here as a refugee from Vietnam, and I grabbed onto the American dream. I went to Thomas Jefferson. I was first class to graduate from there. I went to the United States Naval Academy, Naval Postgraduate School. I had fellowships at MIT and Harvard, but I paid back every dime of that American dream with 25 years of service in Navy Special Operations. So I've seen a lot of death, and to have, the former president, who was the first president in 70 years not to start a new war, to endorse me on Memorial Day weekend was pretty significant.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Virginians, a lot of Republicans paid attention to that endorsement, and they brought you their support yesterday in the polls. Now we move into the general election. How tough is this fight going to be against Tim Kaine?
Well, let's not fool ourselves and say, oh, this is going to be a walk in the park. I mean, Tim Kaine has been in various offices for 30 years. He knows how to shake the money tree, and it comes down to money, right? I mean, he can get his voice out there and spread all sorts of lies. I mean, he's going to start with, hey, he's an extreme, ultra, MAGA, guy. He's crazy. He's a white supremacist. He's a Nazi. You can say whatever you want. If you got the loudest microphone. But look, Tim Kaine has not done anything for Virginia in the 30 years he's served in various offices. And not only that, look at the last 3 years here. In 2021, we won every single statewide election. The Republicans did. In 22, we gained 1 seat. In 23, even though we lost a House, it was pretty much dead even. And now with 7 polls showing Donald Trump and Joe Biden neck and neck in Virginia, this is a winnable seat. We just need to fight for it, and we just need people to step in.
Yeah, it's going to be a very real race this year, not just for President Trump, but definitely for you as well. And I'm thinking about your candidacy, Hung Cao. Of course, you ran previously in one congressional district. Now you're running statewide to become a U.S. senator. One of the advantages you have in Virginia is that much of the state geographically is Republican. But once you get to northern Virginia, things get a little bit more complicated for sure. My impression of your candidacy, though, is that you will be able to chip into these Democrat strongholds in northern Virginia. How do you assess it?
No, you're absolutely right, Vince. In 22, we didn't win, but we moved that northern Virginia, which is hardest for any Republican. We moved it 13%. That's where Joe Biden won by 19 points. We took it down to 6. And this is what scares the heck out of the Democrats, that I was able to move the needle that far.
Yeah, for sure. What role do you think? One of the things I've noticed in Northern Virginia, at least, and perhaps this is across the state, I'm not sure if it is, but on the election ballots, one of the languages there is Vietnamese, because we have a massive Vietnamese population in Northern Virginia. And my impression has been, talking to Vietnamese Americans, they're very supportive of you, Hung Cao. I don't know if you know this. Will that play a role at all, do you think, in helping you in Northern Virginia?
Oh, absolutely. They've been the biggest donors. They've also been the biggest door knockers and everything else. I mean, they want the first Vietnamese American U.S. senator who will be inaugurated on the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. I mean, that's pretty significant in itself, but also someone who believes in the same values that all the minorities up here believe in, which is God, family, and country.
One of the things I've noticed talking to Vietnamese Americans, including yourself, is, boy, they hate communism. They despise communism. They love America, and so many of them hate the direction we're headed in, Hung Cao. Can you talk a little bit about that, sort of where we are as a country right now, where we're headed, and what you're trying to retrieve us from?
Oh, you're absolutely right, Vince. I mean, no matter what you call it, communism, Marxism, socialism, and now they call it equity. Equity sounds a lot like equality, but it's not. It means everybody finishes the same. And, you know, Vince, you and I are never going to play in the NFL or the NBA, right? I mean, it's just not it's not in our cards. And this is why equity is so bad. And, you know, they're turning this country to what I ran away from, and a lot of these minorities ran away from. And so this is going to be their Achilles heel in 2024.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I really do. What comes next in this campaign for you now that you're in a general election phase? How does that change everything for you?
Well, obviously, Tim Kaine is the big money man for the DNC. He was the chairman of DNC, and he's got $10 million in the bank right now. And unfortunately, we had a very expensive primary, and so we need to build that back up. But really, it's getting our message across all of Virginia that Virginia is not blue. Virginia, if anything, is purple. But down south, and when I say south, that's Rappahannock, Fauquier County, and Prince William County, and southward. They're all very red. They're very conservative, and they believe the same things we do. You know, like just get out of my business, stay away from my home, and stay away from my kids. That's all we want. Leave us alone.
Yeah. On the issue of your life story, you know, you come to the country as a refugee from Vietnam. You're a legal immigrant to the United States of America. Yesterday, President Biden announced an amnesty for well over 500,000 illegal foreign nationals who are in the United States right now. And I noticed that you had some very strong reaction to that yesterday. What do you think when you see a president of the United States saying it's okay to break the nation's laws and you can stay here and call yourself a U.S. citizen?
That's exactly what you said, Vince. I mean, don't ask for the American dream if you're not willing to obey the American laws and embrace the American culture. I love this country so much. I wrote a blank check to this nation up to and including my life to defend it. And now he's saying, hey, come over here, do whatever you want. I mean, are you going to tell that to Rachel Marin's family or Laken Riley's family? It's wrong. I mean, these people are coming over here and they're breaking the laws and they don't think there's anything's going to affect them. And I mean, besides those two young ladies, there's been a lot of young ladies who've been sexually assaulted by these illegal aliens. And not only that, we have military-age males from China, Syria, Yemen, putting a stronghold in our country right now.
Yeah. You know, when Biden does things like this, you know, we try to turn to the people in Washington who can do anything to push back. And unfortunately, it seems like sometimes there's very few people who are in a position to do that. That includes in the United States Senate, where we've had Republicans who unfortunately tried to work with Biden in order to make permanent the problems on our border. Senator Mitch McConnell, Senator James Lankford pushing that along earlier this year. Thankfully, that failed. Should you arrive at the United States Senate, Hung Cao, what would you like to do differently as a Republican senator?
Well, we need to secure the border first and foremost. Like, my job in there is not to wonder what I'm going to do for re-election. Like, if I get 6 years is a long time for me, Vince. I mean, you're a military family. 6 years is 3 tours of duty. That's 3 different PCSs. That's a long time to get things done. The first thing we need to do is secure that border. Don't talk about anything else until we secure that border and defend our country.
Mm-hmm. What about these government agencies who've been abusing their power, in particular during the Biden era, but not just then? I mean, certainly during the Trump administration. As a senator, what can you do to rein them in?
Well, there's hearings, and all the SESs are not immune to being, to being asked for the resignation. A lot of these guys, especially the seventh floor of the Hoover building, need to go away. We need to start cleaning house. If you've been there more than 5 years or so, then you've been there too long. It's time to move on or move out. Yeah.
So problems, of course, with the FBI, the Justice Department broadly. We've been watching with horror as Joe Biden has been dispatching prosecutors within his administration and certainly fellow Democrats across the country to try and take down his political opponent, Donald Trump. What do you make of all of the efforts that the left is leading against President Trump right now to paint him as a convicted felon?
Joe Biden's the unconvicted felon, right? Let's just be honest here. They're a crime family. But you're right. This is a third world country. This is what I've seen in the 40 different countries I've lived in or traveled to. This is exactly what third world countries do. And now this is the United States. And Vince, I know what it's like to wake up without a country to call my own or a flag to stand under. I'll be darned if that ever happens to my kids, your kids, or our grandkids. We're not going to stand by this, and we're not going to let them turn this into what I ran away from.
Yeah. Finally, speaking of President Trump, Hung Cao, will we see the two of you on the campaign trail together in Virginia or elsewhere? Do you expect something like that to occur?
Oh, absolutely. President Trump is turning Virginia into a battleground state. He's moving a team in here. And so, yes, we will be around the Commonwealth of Virginia with the president on several occasions. I'm telling you right now, he wants to win Virginia, and we want to win Virginia. And so together we will flip Virginia and show the true colors, which is red.
And the polls, as you mentioned earlier in our conversation, do support that this is very much a dead heat between him and President Biden right now. And he told us on this program not long ago that Virginia is very much in play for him. And at the time, I think he was back by around 4 points. Now the race is a dead heat. So when you talk to him and the people around him, Hung Cao, they're dead serious about the Commonwealth.
Oh, absolutely. They're moving a team into Virginia, and we're gonna take Virginia by storm. We're not gonna let it fall by the wayside because President Trump is not gonna leave any Americans behind, and that includes Virginia. We're not going to say, well, it's just too many liberals up north. No, we got to think about the people down south, especially Southwest Virginia and Hampton Roads, where we have all the shipyards. We need to think about Richmond. We need to think about the entire Commonwealth of Virginia.
Yeah, a lot of problems to deal with. Hung Cao would like to be in a position to do that very thing. Sir, great to have you with us. As always, we'll talk to you a lot as we head into Election Day. Thank you very much. Anthony Fauci's never-ending reputation tour continues this week as he's trying to convince everybody he's actually great, and you don't love him enough. How dare you? You haven't lit your Fauci candle lately, have you? Anthony Fauci knows. He's been watching you. Here he is on, where else? Morning Joe this week, complaining that people don't appreciate him enough.
Yeah, we're talking about the first pandemic since 1918, 1919. And, we often talk, Doctor, about the fog of war. Well, this pandemic was a war of its own kind with over 1 million people dying.
Yeah, you got to break a few Americans to make an omelet.
And I'm just curious how frustrating it is to you that people will go back and pick up something that you may have said in March of 2020, or something that another health official or a politician may have said.
Now, as Joe tries to gloss over all of this and whitewash it and gaslight you about what actually occurred, remember, Anthony Fauci admitted to the New York Times that he was lying about all sorts of immunity thresholds in order to get the public to obey him. He said he was watching the polling before he would make public pronouncements. I'm sorry, I thought you were supposed to be watching the science, not the political science.
Later in that year, whether it was about masks or vaccines or anything, we didn't know. None of us knew where this was going. None of us.
Also a lie, because early in the pandemic, he believed that health professionals needed mask supplies. So he joined in on a lie and said that the public didn't need them at all, that they were going to be irrelevant. Now, in the long run, we, of course, found out that masks really weren't effective at all. And, of course, we were forced to by the government later on. But in the earliest stages, he thought they were effective. And he was trying to reserve the supply for healthcare professionals. So he told what the media referred to as a noble lie, that we didn't need masks at all.
Like, for instance, how long would the vaccine work? Would we need one booster every 5 years? Would we need one every 5 months? How frustrating is it to you that people look back with 2020 hindsight and judge you when you and the rest of the world was in a fog of
they're
war?
always picking on you.
You know, it is quite frustrating, Joe, and that relates exactly to the answer to the question just a moment ago, where I was saying that people really don't appreciate. I don't blame them for that, but they don't appreciate that we were dealing with a moving target. And when we were saying things in the beginning, wear a mask or not, how the virus is spread. I mean, originally it was felt, understandably but incorrectly, by the CDC that it is spread by the same way that flu is spread, namely mostly by droplets, when in fact most of the transmission is not only by not droplets, it's by aerosol, but also 50 to 60% of the people who transmit it have no symptoms at all. We didn't know that in the beginning. It was a changing, moving target.
That's not true.
You're absolutely right. Was it frustrating?
They knew that there were non-symptomatic carriers. That was very early on. In fact, this is one of the conversations around natural immunity. Do you remember? We weren't allowed to have that. That issue would be raised, and Fauci would suppress it in order to enrich the pharmaceutical companies.
It was terribly frustrating because people like to take things out of context and do a gotcha. That's part of the reporting.
This is a bunch of gotchas. They don't appreciate me enough. How dare you? Didn't we fire him a while ago? We were paying him a ton of money. I think we're paying him a massive pension now. It's like $500,000 a year. Because he deserves it. We're showing our appreciation. Coming up, Lorenzo Sewell will be here. He's a senior pastor at the 180 Church in Detroit, Michigan. He was just with President Trump. He's got some thoughts on the black vote in America. A lot to talk about. Good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Adam Credo will be here from the Washington Free Beacon as that gigantic publicity stunt that Joe Biden just wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on in the Mediterranean floats away. Floats away. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. This week, CNN freaking out, panicking that black voters are beginning to break towards Donald Trump in pretty meaningful numbers. Take a listen. CNN's Harry Enton.
Or Biden and Trump among black voters compare where we were at this point in 2020, compare where we are now. You know, at this point, look at this. In 2020, Joe Biden was getting 86% of the African-American vote. Look at where it is now. It's 70%. That's a 16-point drop, John. And more than that, it's not just that Joe Biden is losing ground, it's that Donald Trump is gaining ground. You go from 7%, single digits at this point in 2020, to now 21%. And again, John, I keep looking for signs that this is going to go back to normal, and I don't see it.
Yeah, back to normal. Remember, in American history, normal was black Americans supporting the Republican Party. So in a sense, it is going back to normal. Here to discuss this is a gentleman who was with President Trump this past weekend in Detroit. Lorenzo Sewell is on the phone. He's a senior pastor at the 180 Church and was a part of a big roundtable with the former president again this past weekend. Sir, good to have you with us.
I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Very nice to have you. First and foremost, that audio that I just played from CNN, the media keep acting like it's a gigantic mystery. Why is this happening? They're looking for it to go back to, quote, normal. Can you give them an answer?
Well, what President Trump is doing is he is becoming a prototype of what every Republican candidate can do, and that's just become president. Because you mentioned how historically the Republican Party, they were black Americans, but most people are ahistorical, right? So today is Juneteenth, and what every Republican candidate should be doing is be talking about Willie Mays. They need to be talking about how the Republican Party was started in 1854 to actually go against slavery. And President Trump, he's doing that. He's becoming president in places where poverty is.
So you mentioned that this weekend, too, that this is not something that you've seen from even President Obama. You definitely are not seeing it from President Biden, but you are seeing it from President Trump, that he's going into communities, meeting people where they are and asking them for their vote.
It's brilliant. I mean, President Obama, yeah, did he come to Detroit? Yes, but he went to places that typically aren't heard. Our specific community has a methadone clinic that is right next to our church that serves 500 people that have been generationally addicted. We have human trafficking literally happening openly in our community. And typically, people that are in privilege, people that have access, I mean, black and white, they typically don't feel comfortable in settings like that, right? So when President Trump says, you know what, I don't want to come and speak, I actually want to come and listen, you're going to see those numbers continue to climb.
I know I'm of the opinion. My suspicion is that the media often treat black voters as if they're alien, and that they have some sort of unusual needs that everyone else doesn't have. And my view is that I think everyone in the end, Americans, are all kind of the same on the basics. We want an economy that works for us. We don't want our jobs to disappear. We don't want to be poorer. We don't want to be in credit card debt. We don't want to see our borders open. We don't want drugs to ruin our families. These are basic sort of universal expectations. How much of that is playing a role here in the data we're seeing as more black Americans say they would prefer Trump over Biden?
I really believe that people feel like the Democratic Party is like an abusive marriage, right? So my mother, I saw my mother abused as a child, and I would see my stepfather come home and fight my mother all the time. And then my mother finally made a decision to get away. And I believe that black Americans, they're saying, you know what, Democratic Party, we're moving on. And because of that, those numbers are beginning to increase on the Republican side and decrease on the Democratic side.
You know, one of the realities of the way Democrats campaign among black Americans is to attempt to scare them into submission, perhaps in the way that you're talking about, that abusive relationship. Even the decision by Democrats to advance Juneteenth into becoming a federal holiday, that wasn't a good faith gesture. That was a gesture designed to politicize everything and reinvent history, not to remind people that it was the Democrats were the party of slavery and Jim Crow. Of course, that's not mentioned, as you mentioned nowadays. What do you make of this tactic of constantly trying to scare black voters into submission to vote for Democrats?
Well, I think people are tired, and they're saying terms like no tangibles, no vote. I had the honor of being invited by a pastor into a context that's typically Democrat in the city that we serve, the city of Pontiac, which just is north of Detroit, and they were holding the Democratic Party accountable for not bringing tangibles. And I believe that black Americans are saying right now, we are tired of you telling us that you are going to help us and you're not. For example, our current president, President Joe Biden, he could have passed the George Floyd bill. He did not do that. And I believe that black people are saying, I'm tired of it. We want something that works. And the President Trump, he has laid out the platinum plan, and every Republican needs to know what that is, because that is a very detailed plan, the only detailed plan that I've seen since Lincoln to help black people. It is an extremely detailed plan, the platinum plan, to disseminate over $500 billion in urban communities so they can be self-sufficient.
So now we're looking at these numbers. You heard at the top, I was playing some of the audio, that President Trump now has in the vicinity of 21% support among black voters. But as a numerical matter, it's still a minority support against President Biden, who's in the 70% range. What is it going to take for President Trump to get to the point where he's, where the black vote is going 50-50, or that President Trump, again, brings back a normal black vote, which is support for the Republican Party? What needs to happen there?
There needs to be three things. The first thing is voter education. Today, President Trump needs to make sure in every major city, churches like mine, have the resources and the access to educate their community, because people want to be educated. We heard that from everyone that came on Saturday. That's number one, voter education. Number two is voter access. People need to know how they can vote. That includes absentee ballots is a thing, right? So they need to understand how they can vote and when they can vote. And then the third thing is voter transportation. People need to be able to know that there are hubs that will get them to the ballot box on the day that they need to vote. If those three things start happening, we will see the numbers climb in ways that we would never have expected.
Lorenzo Sewell, tell us, if you would, a little bit. Again, we're talking to the senior pastor at the 180 Church in Detroit, Michigan. You were just with President Trump this past weekend for that roundtable that you so clearly value, that he was there having that conversation. Can you take us behind the scenes a little bit? What was it like having President Trump there? What were your conversations like?
if you would have bet me $1 that people would have sang happy birthday, if you would have bet me $1 that Mario, the black man that I was sitting next to who was incarcerated for 26 years and now is a business owner, when he asked the president that he would make sure that our soldiers were not wearing high heels, if you would have bet me $1 that everyone, right? And the entire church stood up and applauded. If you would have said, Lorenzo, that 4 major rappers from Detroit would have been there saying that they used to be Democrats, but when they own businesses now that they found out they were Republicans, if you would have bet me $1 that when people rushed President Trump, that he didn't get socially awkward, but that he was there and that he was present. Yep. If you would have bet me that $1 that would have happened, I would have lost that $1 bet.
Yeah, it is remarkable. And that is a good point. He decided to spend his birthday weekend with you, with the people of Detroit. Sure. And it's nice to hear that everybody's saying happy birthday to him. And it is, and one of the other headlines that I saw out of Detroit that really struck me was that the former mayor of Detroit, Democrat Kwame Kilpatrick, has also endorsed President Trump. So it is, President Trump is an unusual force, certainly in American politics, to get headlines like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he pardoned Kwame when President Obama could have done it twice.
Yes. Yeah. So where do you think this all goes from here? What do you expect come Election Day, especially among Black Americans? Do you think that President Trump is going to get the kind of support that brings him across the finish line?
Well, I really believe that the Republicans need to take the momentum of a day like Saturday, right?
Yeah.
And they need to build on that momentum. They need to educate our community. They need to make sure our community understands when to vote and how to vote. And then they need to make sure they get there to vote. If they do those 3 things, I believe that you will see momentum happen because people are tired of being abused. They're tired of their votes being taken for granted, and they're sick and tired of not seeing any tangibles.
All right. Well, Lorenzo Sewell, thank you very much. You had a very unique seat. You do have a unique seat in American politics, and we're grateful for your insight into it today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Lorenzo Sewell, senior pastor at the 180 Church in Detroit, Michigan. That was a cool experience. And again, birthday weekend, President Trump right there in Detroit. And you heard the pastor say this weekend that this is a very unique thing. This is a very unique thing for Trump to be here. In fact, here he is over the weekend sitting alongside the president.
President Trump, I'm so humbled that you would be here. President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Very humble, really nice. Thank you. My honor.
On this issue, I saw this morning over on the there's a radio program called The Breakfast Club where there's a host who fancies himself a god. He calls himself Charlemagne Thagard. T-H-A is apparently his middle name, the one that he invented. But anyway, so he hosts this program, and he's been getting a number of callers in lately. In fact, back to back apparently this week, saying they're not really up on Biden at all, and in fact they're very supportive. Some are. Of Trump. Take a listen to this. Here's one caller saying that Biden is just too old for the gig, suggesting that Trump is as well, but just take a listen to the tone here.
Hello, who's this?
Yo, this is Tone. Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing?
What's up, Tone? Get it off your chest.
Yo, I wanted to comment on that Joe Biden situation, right? And I think it's important after this presidency, right? We really set an age limit on these people who we voted in the office, bro. We got a freaking convicted felon that's 80, and then we got a demented Joe that's 81.
Demented Joe.
Like, come on, what the hell are we doing?
Well, I don't think America ever expected this, so they never put anything in place for it. That's what I'm getting. That's what I'm gathering.
Exactly. So that's the point I'm making is now that these are the 2 choices, like I don't know I don't know too much about this politics, man, but I just think we gotta put something in place to where I think anybody above 60 is too old.
I'm with you.
Yeah, the age thing doesn't bode well for Biden, definitely, and of course that keeps showing up in polls. Another caller named Israel calling into the Breakfast Club saying, well, he can see what's happening to Biden with his own eyes.
Hello, who's this?
Hey, this is Israel. How y'all doing this morning?
Israel, what up? Get it off your chest, brother.
I just want to say, you Democrats keep want to tell us not to believe our lying eyes. Like, everybody can see Joe Biden he is 81, and God bless him. But that don't mean you're capable and you're the only person to run this country. We see what's going on. You could tell us this not happening, this is not happening, but we see it. We actually out here living it. I'm actually seeing people having to put their groceries back at the cash register. People barely can afford energy bills now.
You see, you hear what he said. He said, I'm watching as people have to put their food back at the cash register because they can't afford what they're attempting to buy at the grocery store now. People can't afford their energy bills.
So quit peeing on my leg and telling me it's raining. You got wars breaking out everywhere. And one more thing. You know why nobody don't like Trump?
Why?
Because that man was the only one in the past, he's the only president in the past 50 years that didn't get us in no wars. And wars is big money. Wars, defense contractors run the world. He's the only president in the past 50 years that didn't get us involved in no wars. The only one.
All right, so when Israel says, when nobody likes Trump, what he's referring to is in Washington. You know why nobody in Washington likes Trump is because that guy doesn't get us into wars. He also complained, this is great, he also complained about Kamala Harris screwing up traffic in, I think, Atlanta is what he referred to.
Tell Kamala Harris to start coming down here in Atlanta jamming up that traffic, especially on Friday in the rush hour. She is not that important.
She's the what you mean?
You may think you into your white husband. You're important to him, but you're not that important to us.
She's the most important. She's the most important woman in the world.
Not when you trying to get home with traffic. You trying to get home. Took him 2 hours to get home yesterday.
Yeah,
tell them brothers down in California who should locking up in mass incarceration for weed charges, which is DA. Tell them that.
Tell them that. By the way, Charlemagne goes, she's the most important woman in the world. I presume Charlemagne doesn't have a wife to say something like that. I would never be caught dead set. Kamala Harris is the most important woman in the world. All right, let's go to the phones. I got Rick calling in from Reston. Now line 2. Rick, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Gallinay Show.
Hey, Vince. Thanks so much for taking my call. I appreciate it. I was listening to you and the pastor talk just now, and a question popped into my head. I've been thinking for a little while now, and that is, are we going to reach a point where a political, religious, cultural community leader like that guy is okay if a politician, if Trump or someone else shows up and talks to, the crowd there and doesn't focus in on some immutable characteristic of the group. So it's not about we're going to help black people in a certain way, we're going to help Hispanic people in a certain way, but instead maybe focuses more on, economic success, regardless of those immutable characteristics or whatever. I'm going to make the economy better. It's going to be good for everybody. Right. And we've always had that conversation. But what I want to hear is I want to hear those leaders say, hey, my congregation, my people, whatever it is, this community, I want you to listen to this guy because he's saying it because he wants to make everybody more successful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a tremendous point, and a really good one. And, it reminds me of all things, that Don Lemon, Morgan Freeman clip we play from time to time, where they're sitting around and they say, the more you dwell on race, the more you exacerbate that issue. And you kind of keep it alive. And Morgan Freeman, about a decade ago, was saying on CNN of all places, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't obsess over that. And that's the right attitude to have, certainly, as certainly the Martin Luther King attitude that he was advocating for in the I Have a Dream speech, and it's the one that we should be pursuing. Now, there's no question, Rick, as you point out in your excellent insight, that there are obvious coalitions in the United States that do identify based on these things, but we really do want to advance as a country so that you don't have to. And think about what President Trump did this weekend in Detroit. One of the things he did, many of the things he did, were universal principles. He announced in Detroit that he wants to get rid of taxes on tips for tipped workers. Not only that, he wants to get rid of the income tax entirely. Talk about something that would actually lift up all boats, regardless of skin color. The key, of course, the president going places that Joe Biden wouldn't dare. And that's been a good move. The pastor said it. People hearing that, appreciating that, feeling respected, just go in there and ask for the vote. What's the worst they could do? Say no? Coming up, Adam Credo is coming up, and we'll talk to him from the Washington Free Beacon about Biden's Gaza Pier stunt. It's cost us at least $250 million as that thing floats away into the Mediterranean.